I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:33. I hate to start the meeting off with a somber note, but I would ask for a moment of silence for a longtime employee of MSAD 34 and RSU 20. Minnie Payson worked in our office for years as payables. Those of you that didn't know her, she was a wonderful person, full of life, full of jokes and full of character. I last walked her into the gym at the Y 3 weeks ago, her clutching my arm, and she said she was doing well. And that's the last I saw of her, and the passing of her today was sad news for me. And it's a great loss for RSU 71, former 34, and RSU 20. Thank you. Any adjustments to the agenda?
I have one, 12.3, consideration to approve the superintendent to accept oil bids.
Any others? Motion to adopt the agenda as adjusted?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Thank you. We have no recognitions this evening. Consideration of regular board meeting minutes, January 12, 2016.
So moved.
Second. Changes, corrections, anybody noticed? All those in favor? Thank you. Consent agenda, we'll take both of these if you don't mind at once. 6.1, Finance Committee meeting, January 12th. Building and Ground Transportation Committee, January 20th, 2016.
Take them all as one?
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
Changes, correction? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you. Any presentations this evening, Mr. Dunn?
No.
Anybody from the public wish to address the board at this time? Report from the superintendent.
I have a couple items. First of all, on January 14th and 15th, I attended the Maine School Management Conference. Discussion on the first day was the art of leadership and creating a positive work culture. And then on the second day, we had a lot of folks from the DOE, including the now Commissioner, William Beardsley, who talked about public education in the state of Maine. Then probably the best part of the whole 2 days was the legislative work ahead. They had the co-chairs of the Education and Cultural Affairs there, and we talked about performance-based diplomas, standards, and things that the legislature is looking at. Then we had the pre-K through 16 educational future presented by the University of Southern Maine President Dr. Glenn Cummings. Plus the other part, it was good to talk to other superintendents about what's going on in their districts. Secondly, attended a webinar by Drummond Woodsum last week that dealt with the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is the new federal education law that's replaced the No Child Left Behind, with a strong emphasis on special education. Went to the Wallow County Tech Center Cooperative Board last Thursday with both Denise and Tony. And in 16-17, the Tech Center is going to be putting in a halftime program called Outdoor Leadership, which will be pretty exciting. We're hoping that we get kids that will sign up for that. And then on February 10th, the Building and Grounds Transportation Committee meeting will need to be rescheduled as the representatives from the Simons Company have been called to a company national meeting on that date. All three of them. So I didn't ask what was going on, I just accepted the fact that
This was a meeting for the 12th?
the 10th, we're going to meet on the 10th.
Okay. Yep.
And that's it. I'll answer any questions that people might have.
Anyone?
No, sir.
Let's move along to committee reports. Finance Committee.
We met and we're right on target as far as expenditures and remaining budget are concerned. We did have some questions concerning food service, the ordering involved. spending trends, product selections, and so forth, and they're gonna keep a closer tab on how things come in and what they are paying for price, and whether they are better off to shop at Sam's Club for some of the items that they are currently buying through a distributor. And I don't know if the Searsport has paid their debt yet, but yes, they were behind by one payment.
Thank you, Percy. Buildings, Grounds, and Transportation Committee.
We met on the 20th, refer to the notes for everybody to review, very thorough, thank you very much. Some items of note there was just some overall discussion and evaluation of our capacity this year and our performance this year, some discussion around building a better infrastructure for kind of overall accountability, time cards, time sheets. Also some discussion around the potential for needing to look into purchasing a tractor possibly. Snow removal being the primary concern there. For those of you who don't know, we do a lot of our initial plowing obviously, but then the pushback snowbanks, we use a 1-ton pickup truck, and for anybody who's trying to push back snowbanks, that's not necessarily effective and puts a lot of strain on that truck. So there's some talk about us possibly needing to get a tractor to do some of that. Last year we had to hire a contractor to do some snow removal for us during the heavy storms, and that proved to be an unexpected expense that was expensive. And then some of the other things that we discussed was just evaluating our overall transportation needs regarding special services, et cetera. So good discussion.
Thank you. We have no old business this evening. New business, reading of the proposed 2016-17 school calendar, which you all should have in your packet and received prior to this meeting. I'm sure Mr. Downing will take any questions.
I will also let you know that when developing this calendar, we had representatives from the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school, as well as administration. And so we looked at the consistency of the weeks. This schedule this year that we're on right now has a lot of time broken up. Prime example is this month that we're just getting through. We came back from the holiday break, and then we had an early release day, and then we had Martin Luther King Day, and now we have another early release day. And that is disruptive to the school, both within the classroom as well as discipline issues. So we took that into consideration, and we also took into consideration the law where dissimilar days between districts at the technical centers can only reach 5. And I went over our calendar with the tech center director, and we are at the 5 between the 3 districts. So everything is looking good. I'll answer specific questions if you have any.
I do.
Yes.
On November, the week of the 20th,
Yes.
I thought, is this something new that we're actually doing parent-teacher, so that basically the kids are gonna be off that whole week?
It is probably for this district, but it is not uncommon in the state. What's happened, it seems, over the past is that the end of that week, right before the Thanksgiving week that you're talking about, had parent-teacher conference, and the kids were in school sometimes for 3 or 4 days, and then came right back the following week, and were only there for a day or 2. And so we looked at the least disturbance for the month of November, and you can see that it almost gives us 3 full weeks before we go on that November. The other is that we looked at where the vacations would fall in and tried to, like if you look at both November and then look at March, we're in school for a while, and we're trying to break up those months as best we can. So that was some of the thinking behind it. But mainly it's consistency of being in the classroom. And those 2 days, as a former classroom teacher, you do wish that you had them longer instead of just a day or 2, because some of them, attendance goes down quite a bit during that week.
I will say, just counting real quick, there's 20 full weeks of school versus, I believe, This was always a hot topic before of 12 to 13, so it looks like we've increased our 4 weeks of school without an interruption for sure.
And if you notice, to piggyback on that, the early release days, we tried to put near where vacations would start, so that, again, you have less of a disruption within the classroom.
So actually, we have 15 full weeks of school.
24 weeks. That's what I can,
Pay, not if there's a holiday in that week.
no, I didn't count the holiday week. I can have 20. Oh, I missed them. 22, 23, 24. I actually came up with 25 that time. What was the number of early release days last year? How many do we have this year? I call it last year.
Oh, my goodness, we have, I believe there's 8 or 9.
I'm gonna say, it seems like every week.
The other is, when we developed this calendar, we developed it for RSU 20, the Searsport in Stockton Springs, and not to be influenced by other districts.
I entertain a motion.
That's for the first reading.
For the first reading of this calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Take the page. Any other questions, comments? All those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to 12.2, discussion of closing procedures per state statute. I will turn this on over to you, Mr. Dowd. Should have received 2 packets. One, I believe, is the state law, and the other one, both are, I think.
Well, the first packet is the state law. It comes right from the main school law book that the state sends us. We copied that, and then what I did was the second packet that I gave you, and if anybody would like to have copies of this, I can make them for tomorrow and stop by the superintendent's office. It gives you an idea of the process that you need to follow in order to close a school. And if I could draw your attention just to the first 2 sheets of the packet that has the Department of Education on it. There are 3 reasons to close a school, and those are replaced by a new building, condemned, or number 3, lack of need. And informational-wise, if the board is looking at Stockton Springs Elementary School, it would fall under the 3rd one, which is the lack of need. Currently, we house our pre-K program there. Then, after you've done and looked at that, I've included the closing of the school, the vote, how it has to be cast, how the articles are written, and the laws in which you follow. And those are 4102, and then the next one is 1512. And for us, on 1512, we would be looking at number 6, which is the multiple municipalities. We have 2. That would be Searsport and Stockton Springs, and therefore both have to vote. And then there's ways of closing a school as well as if the school was to stay open. The other part of the law that was important for you to see is that for the board to take action, they have to have it on the agenda and have an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the elected membership. So if you look at 5, 2/3 of 5 is 3.3. And so I've sent an email to the state to ask them, is it 3 or 4? And I'm still awaiting an answer on that.
I think ours would be weighted votes, because we still carry weighted votes.
You do still carry this.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm gonna get an answer for that one. And then the last parts that you see involve all of the information that has to be provided to the state after the supermajority vote. And then the commissioner has days to whether or not he will allow that to proceed. And so that becomes the business manager and the superintendent collecting all that information. But that is the informational aspect of the procedure to close a school in the state of Maine. And I wanted you to have that in front of you so you could look at it before it's brought to the board for any action. And the other I thought you would be interested in the information, is what we are looking at for this year's budget in the various accounts for the Stockton Springs Elementary School. So that should give you the information to start looking at it and making some decisions on where you want to go with this. And then you'd have the public would be involved in that. So, this is the first phase.
So how much, where's the offset, where's the revenue from this? Pat,
The revenue for
the Stockton School,
as far as revenue from,
the Head Start program, is this
That'd
the,
just be a student head count, that's in your ED 279.
which was
I'd have to look
40,
it up. I'd have to look it up.
wasn't it 40?
40 is the number.
Yeah, I believe it was in the reading.
Does that sound right?
It sounds like the number that was used.
So is that rounded off at 7,000, are you talking 280,000, and then our cost was 206, so the active,
I'm not sure what we get for pre-K kids, I think it's around.
Six.
around
Six.
6, so 240,000, and we can house those 40 students in Searsport, correct? Or
Mr. Clement and I have talked about that, and we're looking at one classroom that is empty at this point, and then the restructuring that we would do to gain another classroom. So the answer is yes.
Chris, that last item, the construction services, is that the final payment?
We have another one next year, plus a little, right?
242,465, I think, is the balance. Not 142,
142.
465. So
We'd have to include that, if we vote to close the school, we need to include that in our budget to pay it off before we close the school, correct?
it does sound familiar,
And
yes.
I believe there's some interest penalty. for-
No penalties for
I'm
interest
just
on that,
wondering,
no.
okay.
That's the debt service, and that's due on July 1st.
And yes, Tony, you're right, that if we close the school, the only line that we would show in the budget, if the taxpayers approve the closing, would be that 142 to retire that debt.
So this loan is different than a state subsidized loan. I know in a state subsidized loan, you get penalized interest and stuff like that.
Apparently, this was a revolving renovation loan,
Okay.
and I talked to Tony at Maine Municipal Bond Bank in the summer. She said there was no penalty.
Great. So without the debt service, you can see our operating costs are around $105,000
Mhm.
to operate that building. Questions?
Purely from a logistical standpoint, so I mean, the first thing that really gets this in motion, if we should choose to take this route, is an article needs to be brought before the town. Just curious as to if anybody has any idea what the timeline is that we have to operate under in order to make sure that that's done.
Very tight.
It's very, very tight, right? Okay.
At this
that
point,
was-
very tight.
The first action has to be the board. to make the motion
Okay,
to close. That would be on the agenda. And then the second action would be, everything starts, and we have to get all the figures together and into the commissioner's office. And it is a tight timeline.
okay.
So does central office feel comfortable with the timeline? Is this something that's achievable or something that is really unattainable this late in the game?
It's not unattainable, but it's
Right.
very tight.
If we're directed to do so, we will do so.
I think
The
that-
tight, the crunch really comes in getting the public hearings and votes and all that done before we have to go to take our budget. So it all kind of crunches in and,
Like I said, we really need to do this before we present our budget.
Right.
You know, that's a huge effect.
so we can, as we did last year, we can have the numbers, you know, for both and just keep moving along to, you know, working the budget and working this process side by side as we move through the next few months. And yes, it will be.
I guess my only hesitation at all would just be I'd like to see the plan for the introduction of 2 classrooms into the elementary school, what it does to our existing classrooms, what it does to our existing structure. We know we'd obviously have to do some things outside to comply with the pre-K laws as far as fencing. But I don't want to disrupt the flow and integrity of the elementary school that we have right now by cramming students in a place where we don't have room. That was the concern last year, and that would be my concern again. We have discussed if it's something we really wanted to do, and worst came to worst, we could do like they did when Dustin and my children were there. It was 2 halftime programs, but I think we're shortchanging the students to fall back to that. I think full-time program has its benefits, shows its benefits. So that would be my only question, you know, is it gonna work in the elementary school? What happens by chance if we have an influx of students? You know, how many students can we absorb within the existing K through 5 with those 40 students, just things like that I'd be wondering.
Yeah, if I recall, it was about this time last year that Head Start was able to start citing for us a projected enrollment for next year, and I think that that would be important information for you to know about whether or not we'd be able to have the capacity to do that. But I just echo exactly what Tony's saying too, is my primary concern is that overall flow within the school, how they're gonna commingle, how crowded that's gonna be. But separately, I think it's important, it's the only reason why I asked the question is suspicion it was gonna be a tight turnaround time on this stuff. But I'm excited to hear that we can kind of work together and still carry forward in trying to present a budget with and without. But I think it's important to do our due diligence. At the same time, I mean, I don't think it's certainly not a surprise for anybody. We were talking about this last year and the year before. So it shouldn't feel rushed in that regard, that we're rushing to make a hasty decision on that. But I don't want to move forward until we have some of those answers.
And Larry and I are actually gonna sit down with Jess Francis on Monday. We set up a meeting to talk to her about Head Start and projected numbers, and
Well,
we've been having discussions on the effects on the elementary school.
they're at capacity, pre-K, correct? 20 students per classroom? Do you know if we turned any students away this year from the pre-K program? Larry?
I don't believe so.
I don't believe so.
Nope, I think they reached capacity late, from what I understand.
Gentlemen? Bill?
No, not at this point in time.
So I'd say the feeling from the board is, you know, just a few answers and let's get the ball rolling. It's easier to pull the plug than to try to put the plug in at the very end.
So my question would be, do you want it on the February 9th agenda?
If that's attainable, yeah. The sooner the better.
Well,
What are you asking about having on the agenda for February 9th?
Yeah, to clarify, Tony, you're talking a motion to take action on it on the next school board meeting? Is that ultimately what you're asking, Chris?
I'm asking for the information that you and I asked
Me
about,
too.
report back to us. I mean, you can put it on the agenda for discussion and possible action,
Right.
so we don't have to wait another 2 weeks. But again, I don't want to make that hasty decision on the 9th if there's still unanswered questions.
I agree.
But I say proceed as the board, is everybody in agreement, the board wants to proceed with investigating this? We think this is probably the best financial move for the RSU.
I just want to make sure that we look at all
Right.
options.
Right.
This is the due diligence phase.
Correct, yeah.
Do we know, at this point, is it gonna affect us? Are we going to need it? If it doesn't cost us anything to operate, once this 101,000's paid, is it something that we're gonna need for the magnet school? If we close it, I'm just asking, is it a facility we're going to need?
That is a difficult question to answer, and the reason being is the magnet school is just now starting to get their board sort of put together. And then the other is that the magnet school hinges on the state budget,
Right.
because it's a school supported by the state, and, you know, there's so many variables in the state government at this point, that if they were to say no, I guess what I'm saying is that we should move forward without the magnet school being attached at this point. Simply
That's
because
what
we
I
don't
wondered.
know what's gonna happen there. We may have a better idea in the next, 2 to 3 months, but at the same time, it would be my recommendation to keep moving forward and let, after we get our numbers, to make some type of decision.
I agree. I think if our buildings were 75 to 80% capacity, then I'd be concerned about that, but at almost 50% or less, I think there's plenty of room. I mean, the magnet school would have to draw 200+ students to fill our building to capacity.
And remember, when the separation is officially over after this first year, you're going to have quite a few number of students that are coming back into the district as well.
Could possibly. And
Yes.
we could have some going the other direction as well,
Mhm.
yes.
So it's something that we do need the numbers.
And I would have to ask Jim, but I got thinking the other night when he was asking, discussing the logistics, but the school was approved for the town of Searsport. It wasn't approved for RSU 20. So that would lead me to the question, can they technically house the magnet school in a different town? If it was approved for the town of Searsport. It wasn't approved for RSU 20, it was approved for the town of Searsport. So it leads me to the logistics of them being able to actually be housed in a different town. That's why he asked for board members from Searsport and town people from Searsport, because it's really a Searsport legislation.
I think he asked for everybody, actually, in that meeting the other night.
Did he?
He did. And my thinking is if RSU 20 is going to reap the money for the student count,
No, we only reap the leasing of the building. We do not get
I
student
thought you
count.
said we got student count for the magnet
No,
schools. the
the
school
magnet school
inside
is
the
run on
school.
its own.
Yes, but I thought we got the count for that.
We only reap the lease payment that they pay to us for using the facilities. It has absolutely nothing
For
to do.
RSU 20.
Correct. But it's a town of Searsport legislative approved magnet school. It's not approved for RSU 20.
So,
And Jim can answer that simple question about the Stockton Elementary School. They may say, yeah, you can house it where you want. I'm just thinking, the state's approved this for a town, can they reside in a different community? And Jim could probably answer that question another time.
it's something we might want to ask him.
Now, this isn't gospel, it's an article, I think, in the Republican Journal, and they state.
Well, Ben's here, so it must be gospel.
Everything in the media is gospel.
The magnets, and I'm just taking out one, there's the article, as it appeared in the Republican Journal, that, and then on another page. And one of the paragraphs, it says, the magnet school would be located within existing RSU 20 buildings in Searsport and Stockton Springs,
I didn't read that article.
Mhm.
but would be governed by its own administration and
So there's your answer there,
so,
I thought so.
we need that's why I said we have to make sure we have all the information. And if I may, can I go back to what's owed on Stockton Springs? A payment was made on July 1st of $101,000, and what's left is $142,000, is that correct? And will that payment be made next July 1st, so that there is no debt on Stockton Springs?
That's up to the board,
It's up to the finance
because the
committee.
payment that would be due, my understanding is another 101,138.
And,
I don't believe it all comes due on that.
okay, but so the board would make that decision. Okay, fine, thank you.
Thanks for pointing that out, Bill. I didn't read that article. Anyone else? You have your direction?
Correct, and I would make the recommendation that we come on February 23rd, because I think February 9th, we're trying to push it too close.
Okay.
So on February 23rd, we will bring the numbers and the board for consideration, which would be in the form of a motion.
Everybody, does the
Discussion
23rd,
of
is
possible
everybody gonna be here?
action, correct.
Yes, is everybody gonna be here on the 23rd? Because clearly with weighted votes of only 5 members and needing a supermajority, we really need to have everybody here. Nobody's out of town on the 23rd of February. We're good? Is that vacation week? No.
No, week before.
Great, moving on, 12.3, to approve the superintendent to accept the approval of oil bids.
The letter went out on Monday. The opening is tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And that's why it's on here for consideration, because if they're where we're hoping they're going to be, we would need to be locked in by 4 PM tomorrow.
Question. If it comes to pass that we close the Stockton school, will that affect the oil bid? Because we're gonna have a less consumption for the coming year.
It's a good question, Percy. And I can't give you an answer because that would really be up to the oil companies.
I mean,
We
something
would
could
let
happen.
them know. The bids may come in where we don't want to accept any, and then we wait and go out again.
So I would say by the looks of the budget proposal, we budgeted approximately 7,900 gallons of heating oil. I mean, we'd have to look and see what we'd use today. It's clearly gonna be a lot less than what it was last year.
We did
But
it,
it depends also, Percy, if we retain ownership of that building, or if we sell it, or if the town of Stockton buys it. I mean, we're still gonna have to heat it
To some
to
degree.
some degree. But I would almost bet the sum of 7,900 gallons that the rest of the RSU could take that and top off in the spring to use that pre-buy. We ran out of oil last year, correct? We had
Yes.
to buy some at the end.
We they didn't top off our tanks at the end of last year.
that's including the 2 town offices, correct, in that bid?
I don't think they
Ye-
paid for
Yeah,
it.
town of Stockton and Searsport, I believe, were in that bid.
Town of Stockton is, Searsport did not.
Not last year.
Town of
Certainly.
Stockton did?
Searsport, Jane said that Searsport has been talked to the school, I guess we're gonna be in on.
Oh,
This year, but they're not.
They weren't
This
last
is the
year.
They weren't
current bid,
last year,
but last
they
year's
were not
bid
last
wasn't
year.
in.
yeah, but this year they've asked to be in.
And
But
the-
the library,
Yes,
Yes.
Stockton was in last year and it will be in again this year.
The degree days are down this year, and a milder winter, and proudly pray for another mild winter.
Another El Nino year?
I think we'll see the savings in our budget this year.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's the point to be made here. There's definitely some sort of savings realization that's gonna happen. It's just a matter of how much. So, I mean, I think we're being asked to empower you to make that call.
Correct.
So, I mean, I make a motion that we go ahead and approve it as suggested.
Second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? All on your shoulders, Mr. Dunn? Date and time of the next board meeting, location, finance will be 5 o'clock or 5:30?
5.
5 o'clock, February 9th, you said, was the next board meeting?
Yep,
At central office?
personnel at personnel at 6.
Personnel at 6.
We have spring coaches to start looking at.
Mhm.
Board meeting, we've got the Searsport Town Hall at 6:30 as usual. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Are we meeting?
I'll speak to you personally.
All those in favor? Thank you.